grace, patience, understanding. Just a few themes that were highlighted in today's episode with Osayi as she took things way, way back to childhood, to when I was growing up, to when you were growing up, even to those parents right now raising children, because truly this episode is for parents. Osayi is no stranger to research as she took countless amount of time coming up and developing her five-step methodology. And while I definitely want to sit here and list all five for you, I'll just give you two and let you tune in to get the rest. So the five-step methodology, the connected parent method, it involves one, learning about yourself, two, learning about and understanding nervous system science. Now, those steps were not in order, so as I said, definitely tune in and get the rest. But please know that what we may deem as disrespect, what we may deem as disobedience, can simply be the development of children, growing, learning, simply really phasing through the stages of life. So without further ado, enjoy episode 227, Parenting with Patience. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner. I love kind of how much work I've given myself in a sense. I'm actually recording this episode before, or as we actually just dropped episode 199 today. But I know by the time y'all hear this episode, we will be way past 200. I have about 15, 18 episodes that I'm sitting on. But nonetheless, I always kind of speak about this because something that I always preview my guests with is that I may talk a little futuristic during the podcast. For those of y'all who tap in with me live, you understand why I do that. But for my guests, I always tell them sometimes I bite off just a bit more than I can chew, and I give myself a little bit more work than what I need to do as a one-man band. But nonetheless, big shout out to Osayi, man. I'm very, very, very excited. As I told y'all, the guests that I love the most, not to say that if you were not this guest that I felt some type of way about you, but the guests that I love the most are the ones that find out about us in some capacity, whether it be social media, website, friend of a friend, referral, podcast, community groups, which I really love the way we're able to connect. But I love those just because one, it lets me know a few things. It lets me know that not only did you discover us, but you were eager, you saw something that you liked or that resonated with you, the team, anything like that, and you wanted to further that here on this platform. So I always have to I have a special appreciation for those guests, and Osayi was definitely that guest. So big shout out to her, and I'm excited for her really because what she focuses on is very niche, but I think it's very helpful whether you've stepped into that field or not, because it can be helpful even in recollecting some things that kind of went on in your life and maybe your upbringing and everything like that. But it can also allow you to then, in a sense, I guess, break those generational curses or start anew or build that foundation a lot differently than how you move. So did I spoil anything? Did I give y'all some tips and tricks? Is anybody kind of drawing anything from that? Well, if not, we'll get right to it soon. But before we do, Osayi, how are you? How's everything on your end today?
I am doing well. It is beautiful and sunny over here. I'm so glad to speak with you about this thing that I'm passionate about. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely not. Thank you for joining us. Yes, I'm tapping in from Tampa, Florida, too. So it is beautiful and sunny here. I'm not going to speak too soon. We did just get out of some hurricane season, and Tampa is definitely the type it'll be looking like this one way, and then in 5 to 10 minutes, it could be overcast, cloudy, and you could be moving in a totally different direction. But nonetheless, again, I appreciate you just for wanting to join the platform, but also taking the time to come on here. And I know you're going to be able to provide some gems, give some insight to my audience as well. So to bring everybody up to speed, to put everybody on the same page, I kind of feel like I've been mincing words a little bit, beating around the bush a little bit, but to give everybody a better idea of what it is that you do and why you're here today, can you just do two things for me? Can you, one, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then two, tell us what brings you on the Down to Business podcast today?
Yes, awesome. Well, once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Um, I'm really excited. And I've been a marketer for a while and I've really loved it. But something that's been really challenging for me was just like that relationship with my children. And seeing things that my parents did that I wasn't as excited about, but then finding myself doing the same thing with my children later, right? So I'm a mom of two. I'm happily married to a wonderful husband. And when my children came around and I had these beautiful children, I had all these I'll never do this again, or I'll never treat them the way my parents treated me. Not that I had terrible parents, but there are all these little things that you wish could have been different. So I'm like, I'll never do that and all of that. But then I found myself like being just like my mom or being just like my dad. So I studied, got some certifications, and then kind of practiced on my kids as well, and created this methodology called the connected parent method of parenting. Because I found that when you connect with your children, it's easier for you to influence them. And so I know in the Black community, in the African community, because I'm Nigerian, we're very focused on using force and fear, and you must respect me, you must respond when I say jump. But what I've seen is that a lot of my friends, they had that upbringing and they did other things when they were around their parents. And so I'm really excited to share more about this connected parent method and how we can connect to influence our kids.
I hear a lot of things there too, because it's one thing to obviously say that we'll never do this or we'll never do that. We recognize that we can too. Sometimes it's easier said than done. It's one thing to step away, or it's one thing to say, as you said, they weren't necessarily bad, but there were just some things that you wanted to change, or you wanted moving forward, you didn't want to adopt that with your children. But it's another thing when we fall into that. Sometimes just routine, sometimes second nature inadvertently, and sometimes it's just all we know. So sometimes we don't know what the opposite looks like or without looks like, and it's that fear of the unknown in a sense. But there's another thing when on the other side of that, you can also tell yourself, hey, I fell into something that I said I wasn't going to do. Well, instead of just continuously falling into that or making excuses for that, let me now figure out how I can change that. Let me now figure out how we can alter things a little bit. Let me now figure out how we can really get things on the terms that I would like. And then from there, to be able to see those results, to be able to see the interaction and the feedback that you get from your children, those around you, so forth and so on. So I really have to take my hat off to that, because that's not the easiest thing to do. It's not the easiest one to have that realization, to have that self reflection in those analytical moments, and then decide to change as a result of it, and then decide to alter things. Because it's so much easier to just stick to that norm, stick to what you know, stick to what you've been doing or what's been done to you, whether right, wrong, or indifferent. So I love to hear that. At what point, though, did you really realize that this was some sort of like methodology, or this was some type of formula, or you really kind of sat down and built like a blueprint or a foundation for this? Because ultimately that's really what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that this is something that when applied, when taken, everybody's going to be different, obviously, as a parent, as a child, as a household, and everything of the sort. But what I'm hearing is that this can be implemented within different situations. So how did you really come about to structuring this framework to be what it is today?
Hmm. So, I think anyone with kids who's listened to this will be able to kind of, well, I'm hoping they'll be able to kind of understand or think back to a time where your child does something and for some reason you feel so angry. Like when you think back later, you're like, I don't even know why I was so angry about this thing. Or maybe they broke a cup or a dish, or they insisted on wearing something that you didn't want them to wear. And it's not that it was inappropriate, it was just something you didn't like, and you got so angry. So I had a lot of those experiences where it was just like I was feeling this lack of control within me, and I was just like, I don't like that. I don't like that version of myself. Like I go to work and I try to bring the best out of myself when I'm at work. With people I care about, I try to do that. So why wouldn't I want to do that with my children, you know? And then when I was always like around other Black families or African families, they would say, no, 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 that's the Black way. We yell at our kids, we spank them, we pinch them, and all of that. But it didn't quite make sense to me. So I started researching because it just felt like a fear-based thing, and it was like we're putting this trauma, quote unquote, on our children on purpose when life is already hard enough outside, right? So why what is this about? So the more I researched, I realized that actually in African communities back in the day, there is no research that shows that we used to encourage and romanticize and say that beating kids is the right way to do things. We instead, as a community, would raise the kids together. The elderly, the grandparents in the community would take the kids along and teach them a lot of the times through storytelling and taking kids to the farm with you or to whatever work you're doing with you, and they would learn that way. They would see how you treat other people. They would learn in that way. So beating kids actually came as a lot of enslavery. came about, right? So it was like at least to Nigeria and to the African diaspora. It was when some people came as missionaries and stuff like that, and it was just like, this is how you treat people. But it was like we then took that on as what is normal. Back in the day, when people were like hitting their kids or their spouses, it was like, that guy's a violent person, that woman's a violent person, and people would try to support them, but it wasn't something that we said was a good thing. But then things started to change as we started to imbibe some of the ways that came to us through this like getting people enslaved and stuff like that. And so I was working on unlearning some of those things, because it becomes like an automatic response. And so even just saying, I promise I won't do that again, I'm not going to yell at my kids. A few days later, I find myself yelling. And so I needed to take some courses to figure out what's going on. Why am I yelling and stuff like that? And so that's how I started to learn about what's going on within me, and to understand why my expectations from my child are just not normal. Like, they're not the things I should expect from my child, even though I was raised to think that it's normal for a child to sit still. And if a child is not sitting still, they're being disobedient. So there were a lot of things that we learned as we grew up that we took as disrespect and disobedience. That's just mostly, that's how a child is, because a child is curious, because a child is supposed to be moving, and it's not necessarily like there's anything wrong with that child. And so as I continue to do that research, I continue to take my classes, I continue to test things out with my own children. That's how I developed this methodology.
I like that because it shows too that there was work that you had to put in, both internal and external. And it's not just, as you said, we can utter things, we can speak things, but it's another thing when it comes to actually acting on it and how we choose to abide by those words or disobey those words. And so hearing that, it really just lets me know too that there can be this can be very circumstantial. It can really depend on, ultimately we want the results to reflect the same thing. We want to be better parents. We want to set that better foundation for our children, and to have them realize that everything that you spoke about in your answer, everything that we've kind of romanticized or what we felt has been the norm, can easily go somewhere else, or can easily, as easily as it started and has been kind of molded and grown, as much as it can be broken and kind of fixed, and tradition can be something totally different. I think about the parents and soon to be parents or older parents that will come across this video and that will become, or interview, and that will become very intrigued by what it is that you're saying. But I also think in that same breath that some people may just be a bit confused or apprehensive, or not necessarily know where to start or what to do or how to implement this. So for those parents out there whose curiosity is now piqued, for those who want to make changes, for those who recognize and agree with what you're saying, that things do not have to be the way that they have been for so long, where do you encourage them to start? How do you encourage them to begin to want to make these changes for the better for them and their children?
Right. Such a great question. So I like to create simple steps. And so with my methodology, I have 5 simple steps. Of course, for every single step, you're going to have an opportunity to delve even deeper. But I like to do, let's focus on these 5 steps, and you can work on it one at a time. And I found that while I love work, I love business, the relationship with my children is so important to me that it impacts my productivity at work or my peace of mind at work. And so this is why I'm excited to actually talk about this with your community, because oftentimes it's like we could talk about sales, we could talk about marketing, we could talk about networking and stuff. But if our families are not okay, it's hard to really compartmentalize, even though some people think they're doing it well. But the pressure that builds up within us can be really stressful. So, with that said, the first step in my methodology is learning about yourself. And I know that sounds simple. Like, I know myself. I've been in this body for years and decades and whatever. But what I observed is that sometimes we don't really pay attention to ourselves. We just kind of respond. And so I always encourage my clients to just observe, like almost like you're a researcher. What is it that your child does today that really aggravates you? What did they do? How did that make you feel in your body? Does it make your heart start beating? Do you feel like you want to just punch them? I know that sounds violent, but oftentimes our bodies go into like this fight or flight mode. And so it's good for you to recognize, like, okay, I'm going into fight or flight, which means I don't feel safe right now. And so oftentimes when we're having that anger response, it means we don't feel safe. And sometimes we can tie it back to experiences in our childhood, or we're interpreting it in a way that is not beneficial to us or beneficial to the relationship. So the first step is really just learning what triggers you or what activates you, what is getting your heart pounding, how does that look like to you, and then just like really observing that. Because once you know that, then you're able to think of some ways to kind of calm yourself up. I like to say calm yourself up because the fight or flight brain is kind of at the bottom of your brain. Then there's the executive functioning brain that's at the top, that's the most developed part of your brain. And so it's always important for you to look for ways to get yourself back to the executive functioning brain, because you're the grown up with the child. So if you're not able to get to your executive functioning brain, it could be it could be hard for you to expect your child to do that. So I'd say that's the first thing. The second thing is similar to that, is learning about brain development, especially for children. Oftentimes we expect so much from children. We just think of children as mini grown-ups, and they're not mini grown-ups. They're actually children. Everything they're doing, they're learning. A toddler gets frustrated because they feel like they don't have control over their lives, and they feel like they're trying to communicate, but you're not understanding. And then you get to a little bit older and they feel like, oh, you don't trust me, you don't care about it. So a lot of things are going on with them. And that functioning, the executive functioning part of the brain doesn't fully develop until about 25. So we're expecting kids to be able to make plans and to sit still and to do all sorts of things. And their brains are not even fully developed to be able to do that. And we can say, oh no, I can give you an example of like this boy or this girl, very good kid. They know how to sit still. If we look at it, it might be that child's personality, or it might be that they've been in fear mode for so long that they've had to force themselves to sit still or to think a certain way. So it does depend, but we need to be able to understand that kids are learning the skills that we have learned. So they might not know how to make good decisions. They might not know how to not interrupt you when you're talking, or how to kind of take control of their emotions. And so they might respond in a way that's like it's like an outburst, and it could be challenging for you to hear that because you were raised that this is disrespectful, and you learned all of that. So I'm not saying that you allow everything, or you're just permissive and just like, well, I don't want to offend my child. But it's more of understanding brain development, so that every opportunity that you have where your child is doing something that's an unwanted behavior, you don't look at your child as that's a bad kid, but it's, oh, there's a skill they need to learn, and how can I support them to learn that skill? And then the third thing, so the first thing I said, learn yourself, learn brain development. The third thing is to understand nervous system science. So there are times that a child might respond in certain ways and it feels like they're being bad. Like, so for example, they might be chewing on their like jacket, or chewing on a pencil, or they're running around, or they're jumping on the couch, or they're doing things like that. And it might just be a sensory need, or they're screaming. It might be a sensory need. So there's been a lot of research that's gone on about just like how everybody's so different. And so one fabric can feel different from somebody else for one person and feel different for another person. So it might just be a sensory need. They have a lot of energy. They need to kind of take it out. They need to displace it somehow. So if they're jumping around and you don't want them jumping around in the house, it might be best to just say, let's go outside, so you can run around outside, instead of taking it, man, that kid is so bad, they're always jumping around and stuff like that. So it's kind of like changing your expectations will help you to approach your child with curiosity, as opposed to approaching them with anger, which just leads to even more anger within them because they go into that fight or flight mode. And then even with everything that we've said, you also want to learn about that individual child. because as any parent knows, if you have even more than one child, same mom, same dad, same parents, same grandparents, whatever, the two children will be different. And that's just how it is with all children. So there might be a child that you're like, they came out with a book in their hand, they can sit still, they don't disturb anybody. But the other child needs to jump around, and that's how they learn. They need to move around. And then you might be like, how are you going to learn? You can't even sit still. But maybe that's how they learn. And there's been some research where there are kids that actually need to move around in order for them to understand whatever it is that they're learning. So that's the fourth step. Really pay attention to your child. How do they want to connect? What bothers them? Because even if you learn all the like general things, brain development, nervous system science, each child is different. And then the fifth step is my favorite step, and that is learning to reconnect with your child. Because no matter what, no matter how much you promise, you're not going to be a perfect parent. And that's not the goal, to be perfect. The goal is to keep that connection with your child. So it's more about, if there's a time you lose it and you yell and you get frustrated, not that I'm saying that you have this excuse to always do things, but if there's a time that happened, try to reconnect as soon as possible and just say, I am so sorry. I was angry about this. It's not your fault. You didn't make me angry, because that's one of the things that I'm working on. And I'm always encouraging my clients is like, you do not want to tell your child that they made you angry, because nobody makes you anything, right? Like, if I were to swerve in front of you, in front of your car while you're driving, you can get angry. But if I were to swerve in front of your car and throw $1 million at you and say that's the reason I swerved, you probably wouldn't be angry anymore. So nobody makes you angry. It's like the interpretation of the thing that's happening, that story you're telling yourself, that you start to let yourself get angry. So it's often unfair, because we tell kids who have really no control, because they're dependent on you for love, dependent on you for survival, dependent on you for everything. And we tell them, it's your fault. You made me angry. You did this. And so I always encourage my clients, we don't tell our children that, but we do tell them, I was frustrated. I was angry. And this is how I will do differently next time. So for example, you spilled that cup of water and it frustrated me because I just mopped. Next time I will support you when you are trying to get a cup of water so you don't spill that again. And if it should happen, I'll take a deep breath and I'll walk away. So it's always good to add, like, this is what I would do differently next time. And so those are the 5 steps that I usually take my clients through. And then we work through really understanding themselves, which is like the foundation of everything, and then helping them, supporting them with different ways that they can reconnect with their children if there is a disconnection, or connect with them if they've never like connected in the past, because it's always like this military discipline and you must do what I ask you to do. And see how the relationship changes as the child grows, because the relationship with a toddler will be different from a tween and a teenager and a grown-up child, so those are the steps that I usually work with my clients.
Whew, that was loaded, but it was very interesting. I hear a lot of different things in there. That perspective is everything, that there's always room for improvement, that sometimes we just need to take a step back before just acting, and think before we just act. And sometimes you really have to just analyze before you just, as you said, enter that fight or flight mode, or just are quick to just anger or yell or just see red. But as you said, when you really think about a situation, and when you really think about the outcome, the scenario behind it, why it happened the way that it did, and why that particular action evoked that particular reaction and emotion out of you, a lot of things can be changed. A lot of things can kind of be configured a bit differently in order to exude the best emotion that comes from it. But with children, it's very important. I smiled when you said it, but I agree with you so much in regards to, we expect them to just be like mini grown-ups, or like we expect them to just have so much development, or just have so many things figured out, in a sense, when they're looking to us for everything, from nurturing, for knowledge, for how to react. That's why they say be careful what you say and what you do around children, because they pick up everything just like that. So very interesting to really hear that. But I love that framework that you walk clients through, because I could imagine that it opens up a lot of eyes for them, or some things that they were doing inadvertently or just as what felt right to them or just second nature, but it was wrong. And this whole time you're kind of instilling something that's wrong. And the more we, that one bad apple could spoil that entire bunch. Everything that you worked for, with one wrong or with one misstep, it could really just destroy everything. Now, in that answer, also, I heard you talking about clients, and that was kind of something that I was interested in too. When it comes to what exactly that you're doing and really getting the word out, what have you found to be your best avenue when it comes to marketing? Do you use a little bit of everything? Is this just, I know we connected on social media, but how do I could imagine that there have been referrals with this, as parents start to find the success and find the value in this, that they want other people to come just the same. So, what have you found to be some successful ways to really get what it is out there that you're doing to the masses and to the public?
Yeah. For this particular, I'd say project, this passion project with parenting, I found that trust is such a big deal. So social media helps, the website helps, certification helps, but I've also found more of in-person kind of events. And I can host events at the library, and that way I'm connecting with parents who are eager to learn about things. I can go to other in-person events and have talks like these for free, and then offer additional services. And then some of the online conversations as well, whether it's a podcast or speaking to people in communities. I'm really particularly passionate about the Black community, just because we have learned all these things that we think is the Black way, which is not when it comes to parenting. And some of us are trying to grow through that. Because oftentimes we say, "Oh, I'm okay. I got spanked, I got yelled at, and I'm okay. I'm thriving." But when you think about it, if you are thriving, why are you like so easily angered and so easy to yell at like random people, and to yell at helpless children and stuff like that? And so those are some of the things that have worked. Where I'm just having these conversations, and I'm able to find ways that I can support people more. But it's really more conversations.
That's important though. That's to be able to work through things, to be able to analyze, reflect, and then come up with a plan of action, even a call to action for some. It can be a lot than rather just reading something or presenting something. But the minute we're able to have that word of mouth interaction, have that in person, really speak, but then when the results start to show, when you're obviously implementing, doing your due diligence to make sure that you guys aren't just having a conversation that's going in one ear out the other, but this conversation is being had. I'm taking the points from it, and I'm going to implement these moving forward, so that we can have some changes, so that we can structure things a little bit differently. And ultimately, I think the biggest thing here, and what this keeps revolving back to, is the best and the well-being for the child, or children in this case, because that's ultimately what this is. Yes, we want to be the best parents, the best adults that we can be, but we also want to make sure that who we're instilling these principles in, who we're instilling these traits in, lack thereof, that they're the best of the best. That mistakes are going to happen. Nobody is perfect, by no means necessary. But are we being diligent? Are we being intentional? Are we being authentic? Or are we just saying, okay, I'm meeting now, I'm sitting down, we're talking, we're going through the session, but as soon as we leave and we get home, it's a completely different operation. So I really love to hear that, just because that in person sometimes will give you the best, rather than scrolling through a website, scrolling through social media, filling out a contact form, shooting an email, sometimes even a phone call, but really having that face to face, being able to sit down, evoke real time emotion and reaction. That's so important. Now, for I heard you speak a lot throughout this, even at the beginning, about certifications, about courses, about education that you had to bring upon yourself in order to really be your best with this, and in order to really show, as you said, that credibility, that trust in other people too, because you are someone who has put the necessary time, and you are someone who is an expert in this field. So, with what you do, with what you are, with what you're running, and with what you're the foundation that you've built in the business that you're taking care of, well, I guess I'll ask I guess I'll ask it in two ways. Did you feel like that coming into this, coming branding yourself in this regard, starting this, putting this onto others as well, that you had to have sort of like certifications, or you had to have a very specific title? And then I'll kind of ask a little caveat to that. Is what you do, does it require licensing? Does it require certifications? Does it require you to be on a certain type of path in order to be able to put that? Because I know once you start involving children and everything like that, it becomes a totally different conversation. So I just kind of want to know what your thinking was. Was this something all along that you kind of wanted to do and move towards, or as you started to get that education, you learned that, okay, this will help my credibility here, this certification will help with this? What was that journey like for you?
Hmm. Another excellent question. So I would say that certification is not required. It's not necessary. I'm sure we've been around people who are brilliant and we can learn from them, or they're great parents and we can learn from them if they choose to teach us and share with us. So I would say certification is not required at all. For me, because I was seeing patterns in myself and I didn't quite understand why I was doing things like, like how I think it's Paul in the Bible said, I do the things I do not want to do. Like in one of the scriptures, he said that, whether he's talking about himself or he's talking about somebody else, that's a different conversation. But it's like I'm doing these things and I'm like, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be so out of control because I'm upset about something that, a day from now is probably not even a big deal. So what can I do to help myself? And that's when I started looking at the research. And I got some information. There's some good books out there, but I think nothing beats having a structure. So a structured system where the somebody is able to really break down and tell you what the main things are, and then you can decide. I want to do more research on this thing because this thing is important to me. So some of the other people that were in the program with me, they wanted to go deeper into autism and supporting autistic kids. Some of the people in the program, they wanted to go deeper into military families and supporting them. And that way you're able to get guidance, as opposed to you're reading this book, you're reading this article, and you're not quite sure how things come together. Eventually I'm sure anyone can get it. But for me, I was not, I didn't really want to invest so much time and years. I wanted to get that information as soon as possible and then delve deeper in the things that really were exciting for me. And so that's how I would say you definitely do not need the certification. You definitely do not need organized education. But I did find it useful. I got certified with the Jai Institute, and the way they broke things down and the opportunities they offered was amazing. And I still even reflect on some of those learnings, and I still have the books, and I still read those books and think about it personally for myself, and then for clients, because everybody's going to be different as well. So there'll be some things that will come up, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Can I research and get back to you about that? And it's always nice to have a community where I can go back and ask questions.
Amen to that. I would say that a lot of what I've come across more recently are podcast communities and are people who are just willing to help and spread love, spread value, spread the wealth, and ultimately want nothing in return. And I think that that's so amazing, just because a lot of times you don't know these people. You've never had a conversation with these people, but it's people out there who have been through the trials and tribulations, been through the ups and downs, have had the good days, but have also had the not so good days, and are still willing to do whatever to make it happen, to pay it forward, to make sure that that next person doesn't have to necessarily go through all the hills and valleys that they had to, but ultimately we still achieve the same success. And we teach each other, because it's not just to say that you're not doing the same for others. You're being a resource. You're, even as people listen to this interview, there's knowledge being dropped, there's insight being dropped, there are things that we can be doing right then and there from what you said, that when you stop listening to this interview, okay, I can implement this now, I can be doing this now, and then further on I can reach out to have a conversation to really fine tune things and go from there. Because as you said, there was a lot that came with it. There's a plethora, of knowledge around this. There are a lot of things that you could be doing. There are a lot of different lanes and avenues that you can even take with this. Ultimately, you found the one that you like and the one that was very most comfortable for you, and you chose to hone in on that. You chose to dive further in on that and continue to educate yourself. Because something that you also kind of touched on, and I want people to understand, was that you said that there are times that things come to you and you're not the end all be all, that you have to go do some additional research, that you have to go get an answer for something, that you have to maybe follow up or check some balances and check some things off before you necessarily say, hey, this is this, and that. And I think that that's important too, because it also lets us know that we are always still remaining students of the game. And no matter how many times, how many people that I talk to, they always say that in some capacity, that, 30 years and 40 years and retired, anything like that, they're still learning. Their times are changing. What was the standard and everything like that last year could be totally different as we move to 2025, and so forth and so on. Everything is always changing, even as the generations change. We're all named something different. Social media, technology, everything that because we have to adjust to this just the same, because I'm not being raised in the same generation my little brother's being raised in. Our children won't be raised in the same generation that we are raised in. So to think that we're just going to keep everything cookie cutter and exactly the way that we had it, we'd be naive to think that. But with the future outlook in mind, something that I always like to do here on the podcast, and not necessarily spoil anything, but recognize that we have met you at where you are in your journey now. That not only do we want to meet you here, we want to continue to follow you and support you every step of the way. So without spoiling anything, without debuting anything that maybe doesn't need to be debuted just yet, is there anything that you are most looking forward to as we end one year and get ready for another? Is there anything that you've kind of been doing research on, or maybe even another lane or avenue that you're looking to get into? Maybe even a client or a parent came to you with something and it wasn't necessarily something that you were well versed in, but now you're kind of looking into it. Anything of the sort like that as we look to continue to follow and support you?
Yes, thank you for that opportunity. So what I'm finding out and what I'm realizing is that the people who raised children in the generations before us, they were raising children for a different world. They were raising children who could be good at work and they will do what they're told to do and they don't have to make noise. But in the world that our children are going to be living in, the most creative people are going to be the ones that thrive, the ones that are not depressed and unable to really express themselves. So they need to have that freedom to be creative, the freedom to be leaders, the freedom to be smart, to ask questions, all of those things. But it's hard for someone who grew up being told to shut up or sit down or don't move to feel like they can trust their bodies or trust their selves, because success and confidence is about knowing that you can trust yourself and trust your mind, and you can make decisions based on the thoughts that come to you as opposed to depending on somebody else to do this. So I know I'm speaking like calmly and everything, but it's actually a very serious thing. Like we're in a desperate situation where our kids might not be able to compete, quote unquote, in the world, because they'll be waiting for somebody to tell them what to do. They'll be waiting for a boss to tell them what to do. They won't know that leading is an option. Or even if you become an employee, leading within the organization is an option, because they'll be too afraid about their own minds and their own lives and the way their own bodies and their own way of thinking. Because if we don't support them, then who's going to support them? Because the other people outside are going to tell them that they're not good enough, they're not pretty enough, they're not smart enough. But they need to be able to come home to us and we tell them that they can accomplish anything and that our homes are a safe space. And so, with that, I'm really excited to launch a new one on one program where I'm supporting parents to create this safe space within their homes, to be able to speak with their children in a kind way, speak with kindness, explain things, and then deal with the different frustrations within themselves. And to know that there's nothing wrong with us as human beings or as grown-ups. It's just we need to learn how to process things differently, because we've been taught to just stuff everything and we never really learned how to process our emotions, and so we just bottle and bottle and bottle up until we blow up, or we blow up immediately, but we never really learn how to communicate, because there'll always be conflict. Conflict is, I want us all to go out by 7, but your child is not ready until 7:05. Conflict is, I don't want you to watch this certain thing on TV, but your child is determined to watch that thing. Conflict is, I want you back home by 8 p.m., and your child decides they want to come back home by 9 p.m. It's all conflict is just about difference of opinions, right? And people deciding to do what they want to do. And as parents, we can try different things. We can try, okay, I'll give you a reward if you do what I want. But after a while, it stops working. We can try yelling. After a while, the kids stop being scared of us. We can threaten that we'll throw them out. After a while, they don't care about that. We can do all sorts of things. But the thing that really works is when your child trusts you. They're connected to you. They believe in you. They see you as their safe space. They don't feel like they need to run away from you or that their friends are a safer space for them. And so I'm excited to launch this program with parents where we're creating safe spaces for our children, especially for Black children, because I find that we often feel like we need to toughen them up at home so that they can deal with the toughness in the world. But it's actually the opposite. We need to soften things at home so that when they deal with all that toughness outside in the world, they know that they have this safe space to come back to. And so in this program, I'm going to be going through all these steps, and we'll go through a 12-week program, and we'll have conversations, one-on-one conversations. We'll just learn everything, and then deal with particular issues that the parent is going through. So I'm really excited about that. And if there's like one thing that I really want parents to take away, or people who are thinking that they'll be parents soon, is that your child is learning. Everything that they're doing, they're learning. Whether they speak to you in a disrespectful way, or they're yelling, or they're not doing, they're all learning. So it's not the labels we put on kids where it's like, this is a strong-willed child, or this is a bad kid, or this is those are just parts of them learning, and they're just trying to be safe. They're trying to survive. And if they feel like to survive, they have to pretend that they're okay with what you're doing, then they'll do it. Or if they feel like they have to fight you, then they'll do it. But they're just learning, and they're trying to survive.
Whew, I like that. I can, from answer one, I really could feel and hear the passion here. But with that, I can definitely say that one, that'll be something that's definitely needed. It'll be instrumental and influential to those who decide to take advantage of it. But two, I could only imagine too what other conversations it will, as a result, invoke, or what other things will come from it, what new discoveries, what hey, I want you to really sit down with one of my friends, because she, we recently sat down. I recently told her just some of the gripes and things that I was having with my children, and I really just want to be better. And a lot of times I feel like it's not necessarily their doing or what they have, but more so my reaction to it, and my just um sometimes, as you said, just not taking that time to just reflect and to think and to breathe before we just and jump on. So I love to hear that, and just as excited as you are, I'm very excited to see it come to life. And we're obviously wishing you nothing but the best of luck with that, but here to support with it however we can, and to know that through this, as you said, we're not raising the same generations, that there are going to be things that are going to have to be adjusted to when 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 8 years from now, 15 from years, 20 years from now, we're it's totally different times, because I even think about some of the things that were going on when I was upcoming, and just some of the things that may have been foreshadowed, or that we watched on TV, or that we looked at, and some of the stuff we just shot down like it's no way that could ever happen. A lot of these things are happening, or they're coming to fruition in some way, in some shape or form. So as you said, that preparation, but that foundation, time and time again, will prove to be the most important. So now, before we give people where they can find you, where they can tap in with you, where they can learn more, maybe even ask questions, follow along the journey, maybe even pick your brain throughout their journey to parenthood, do you feel like there's anything that we have not touched on today? Any last words that you may even want to leave out there for other parents, other business owners, other entrepreneurs, other creatives, anything of the sort?
Oh, that's a good one. Like one thing, there's so many things I can think about. Um, I'd say if it was one thing, I'd say be gentle with yourself. We inherited all this tension from our parents with all their expectations. At least I know I inherited that, all those expectations. So I would always wonder, am I doing enough? Am I doing my best? Is this good enough? What are people thinking of me, and things like that. But I just say be gentle with yourself. Whether you're a business person, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an employee, be gentle with yourself. You won't be perfect all the time. You won't be your best self all the time. Life is supposed to be a cycle, just like the moon, or like a woman's cycle. There will be times where you have a lot of energy. There will be times where you need to rest. And so be gentle with yourself. And the more you can be gentle with yourself, the more you can be gentle with your kids, and the more you can be gentle with other people. And oftentimes, the energy we give out to the world is the energy that comes back to us. Yes, there will be exceptions. There will always be those people that are just upset with their lives, and it has nothing to do with you. But there are times where somebody might even be, they're not acting right. But you come to the conversation in a gentle way, in a gracious way, and they start to respond to you differently. but that will come from you learning to be gentle with yourself. And then you'll be able to be successful. Like, success doesn't have to be all this muscle and beating people and fighting and beating yourself. I know we listen to all these like inspirational things where it's like, I wake up at 5 a.m. and I fight and I do. But success doesn't have to be like that for everybody. You can still sleep till 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and still be successful. You need to find your own path. And the best way to find your own path is to be gentle with yourself, so you can start learning to trust yourself again. You can start learning that you're a good person. You're here for a reason. You're doing the best that you can, and everything's going to be all right. And then we can give that gift to everyone else, including our children.
I don't know if they told you, you might need to start a podcast or like an inspirational series or like a motivational Monday or something. It is Monday when we're doing this interview, y'all. So no, but that's, I love that because it's important. Give grace, being gentle, appreciating the small things. It's all gentle reminders that we need to hear that often just go forgotten about in the daily rigmarole of the day, and just responsibilities and just that grind and feeling like, we do so much for ourselves, for our children, for work, extracurriculars, everything of the sort. And we really have to be patient with ourselves. We have to continue to make sure that that cup is filled genuinely, authentically, truthfully. So thank you. Just thank you for one, just wanting to connect. Just thank you for taking the time to come on here, really to share with my audience everything that you're doing. But thank you for the attention to detail that you're paying when it comes to the youth. As someone who has come from Philadelphia, from the Bronx, from Greenville, North Carolina, from Syracuse, New York, Tampa, Florida, I've seen time and time again how important the future generations are, how important the youth are. As someone, as a father myself, I see how important this is and how needed this is in my son's life. And as someone who wants to continue to be the best father that they can be, I would be doing a disservice to myself if I didn't take a lot of what you said today to heart, and to want to be better for myself, for my family situation, for anything, and then for wanting my son to be the best father, because that's also the future outlook that I think too, that someday he will be a father, he will have kids, and what I ingrained in him, what we instilled in him, that foundation that we set, will also be what he relies on to then act and to serve in the best way possible. So to continuously remain the servant and diligent leader that you are, I really do appreciate everything. So now, before we officially close out, this is the call to action. This is where, people were listening. People may have been intrigued. People may be curious. People may even just want to support, maybe just want to say hello. So for everything, as far as social media, website, best places to reach you, contact you, follow along the journey, give us everything that you got.
All right. So I'd say the best way to reach me is either on YouTube or on Instagram, and it's Osayi Lasisi, OSAYI LASISI. So Osayi Lasisi. And then for my website, Let's Talk About Parenting, go to osayilasisi.com/parent. And then we can schedule a call and just talk about what you're going through and see if you and I could be a good fit for each other, and then we'll go from there. And if it's not a good fit, I can recommend some other people. But yeah, come over, chat with me. Just let's have a conversation and let's see how I can support you.
That sounds amazing. And I am definitely, as I always do at the end of the episodes, throughout the episodes, look, y'all, I'm encouraging y'all. Yes, this is the Down to Business podcast, but the value, but everything, all the information that gets talked about and discussed here is ultimately for all of us to, as we said, to be, whether it be better parents, whether it be better foundation setters, better supporters, better listeners, being more gentle with ourselves, giving ourselves more grace. There's always room for improvement. There's nothing that, as you listen to this episode, you can check every single box off and you say that I'm just good, I'm perfect in that regard. And if you do, well, hit me offline so we can figure out what I need to do to be where you are, because that's amazing. That's in general. But Osayi, I have to, again, thank you so much for just the time, for everything that you're doing. To all my supporters who continuously tap in with us, I thank y'all. I love y'all. Let's end this year with a bang and start 2025 even better. This has been another episode of the Down to Business podcast. Here with Tamar Turner.